Retrieving data. Welcome back everybody. I'm Prakash Pradhan, your trainer for this entire series. So in this topic, we're going to discuss the further continuation of our previous video where we learn how to create a data file. Now in this program, we are going to see after creating all of those records, now how to retrieve all of those records. That means the information that you fed in your previous data file, that has to be retrieved. That means that has to be utilized later on. So that was the only prime concern for using your sequential data file where the records are stored permanently and it can be retrieved or it can be reutilized later on. Now, before we start writing how to retrieve the data from the sequential data file, there are certain terminologies that you need to make clear. That means there are certain statements and the function that you need to understand before we go for writing a program in order to retrieve the data. So have a look over here. So we need to understand something in input mode. Of course, displaying a record from a sequential data file means that's a different mode. Previously, we created a file that was a mode open. But right now, we are going to talk about displaying the content of those records. So that's why the file mode will be input mode. But in input mode, there are certain statements that you need to understand. The first one is input hash statement. So input hash statement simply helps all the user in order to read the data from the sequential data file. And whatever contents are being assigned, whatever informations or whatever data is being stored by the user or by the programmer in sequential data file, if you'd like to retrieve that data, first you need to read. So in order to read, in order to load that record, input hash statement is used. That means whenever you wanted to write a program to display the content of previously created sequential data file, first you need to load the data. So loading and the reading of the data from the sequential data file is done with the help of one statement, and that is your input hash statement. Now if you have to see the syntax of this, input hash file number, that means load the data from this file number. And how many variables that you have used, that means how many data type that you have used, you will have to specify over here. Now there is another one statement while talking about the input mode, that is line input hash. Now if I have to talk about the input hash, make clear that whenever you use input hash, that means the total number of records and the data type that is being associated with that file name is clearly mentioned in that question. But sometimes it happens that you will be provided only along with the file name, but how many records and how many fields were used in that file will not be specified. So that creates some sort of the chaotic situation. But in order to overcome that situation, we do have another one magical statement that is known as a line input statement. That means line input hash statement simply helps a user, okay, to read entire line ignoring delimiters from a sequential data file and assign a string variable, assigned to a string variable. That means if you have got four field name, let's say name, address, phone number and age. Now these are the four different data that you have stored actually using two different data types. Now all of those records of the first line will get stored in single one variable rather than using four variables. Comparing to our previous program, only one variable will be used. Of course, I'm going to show you practically how it works, okay? But before we go to writing a program to display all the records that we created last time, there is another one function you need to understand crystal clear. Otherwise, you will not be able to understand or you will not be able to write a program to display those information, and that one is EOF function. Now, EOF function in sequential data file is mostly used. It's mandatory if you would like to display the content of your file. A sequential data file created by the user can have many records. That means how do you know how many records were there previously? If it was created by you, then you know. But what if I give you one file name and the field name and I told you write a program to display all the records? So there should be one question from your side. Sir, I don't know how many records are stored. Then how will I be able to display all the records as you are saying? Because it is not about the Excel sheet, just you click the sheet and the contents are going to be displayed. It has to be done in a form of the programming. So that's why I need to know how many records are there. And trust me guys, you'll never be informed how many records are there. In that case, you'll come into trouble. So that's why there's another one, your magical function, that's a EOF. So in order to read all those records from a sequential data file, first you need to execute, that means loading those records from the input hash statement. But if you say you have more than 10 records, for example, that means are we going to use more than 10 times the same input hash, input hash, input hash? That is not practical. So in order to overcome this problem, in order to be able to retrieve all of the records from your sequential data file, we have one function that is known as a EOF. So the main purpose of this EOF is to make sure that you have reached to the end of file. That means if you have got 10 records, you don't have to specify display all the 10 records. So who's going to make sure that you have reached to the end of the record file? That is done by EOF. Okay, so this EOF function will help you to load all the records even without knowing how many records were there in your file. It's going to load it automatically. So if I have to talk about the syntax over here, so obviously what will be there? Syntax. Okay, and after that your EOF and the file number. It's simple. Syntax, EOF and your file number. Simple. There is nothing else. So that means the here EOF function is simply used to test the end of the file. I repeat again, whenever you are asked a question related to the sequential file handling, sequential data file, you will never be told that how many records does exist in that file number. So you'll have to use a magical keyword, that's a EOF. Now let's go to the Qbasic and see how the previous file that we created can be displayed along with these three keywords that we learned today. So let's go to Qbasic and see practically. Okay, now we are back to the practical session of the previous program, what we did in your open mode. Now in this mode, file mode, we are going to learn how to display all the records, and we have also discussed about the different statement and the function that is need to be know before you continue with the further program for displaying the content of your file. And without having the knowledge of input hash, line input and EOF, trust me guys, you will not be able to complete your tasks in order to write a program using the sequential file handling in your SEA exam. So now let's write a program to display the content of the file. If you remember, in our previous program we have written a code, that means we have written a program to create a sequential data file called stuff.dat. Now we are going to write a program to retrieve all the records, all the information that we have stored in that master file. So for that, let's start. We are going to use a mode, input mode, and the number of your file was this, and the name of your file is stuff.dat. Okay, done. Now the next question, how do you know that how many records were created last time? Since that program was done by you, so that's why you might remember that there were 3 records. But I also told you that in exam you will be provided along with the file name and the field name. So how many records were there, that will not be specified. So that's why we need to use the power of EOF function that will make sure that you have reached to the end of the record in your file. So that's why we're going to use EOF of file number 1. So this EOF is a function, and this 1 indicates in the syntax we are talking about the file number 1. So this line indicates you need to go till the end of your file number 1. Okay, now while not EOF, you'll have to add this while not also. Okay, while not end of file 1, you'll have to continue your work, otherwise it's not going to work good. That means by simply writing EOF, this function is not going to work. This function is associated with the statement while not as well. So now while not EOF 1, that means until and unless I reach to the end record of my data file 1, I need to continue for the loading process. It means simple that. So now my data types were, remember, this is the file number, and first was a name, second was address, if you see up there, and phone number and age. Last time, if I have used as a $N for the name, I can write over here name dollar also. Second one is address dollar also. So that was a next. Then phone number, and then AGE. Now last time, while supplying your data to store the name, we have written simply $N. So far I remember. Now here I have changed the variable name. Now my next question goes to you all guys. Do you think these variables will be accepted to load the data? Because last time while supplying a data we wrote only $N, $A, P and A, I guess. What do you say? Make a quick guess. And the answer is it's going to accept. Why? You need to compare the data type. Remember that your $N was the string data type, and over here we are using the name dollar. Still the data type is string only, and this one is still string, and this is the numeric data type, and this one is also numeric data type. That means it is not mandatory to use the same variable name that was used in order to create the sequential data file. Just the data type has to be matched. Okay, so this input has one, what it does, it will load the record from your master file. Now after loading, I need to print as well. So what do I need to print? Name dollar, address dollar, phone, and age. And then this while not end of file has to be terminated. So which statement you use to terminate the while loop? Obviously, let's do the when. So it's going to terminate this. That means what's going to happen, and then there's one more statement, close hash one. You make a habit of writing this also. That means this open means now I'm dealing with the sequential file handling, and I have opened this file in I mode. That means displaying a content mode. And this close hash one means I would like to close my file as I have completed my task. This is the complete syntax. So please make a habit of writing close hash one at last. Now let's see once again over here. Open mode, I mode is used to display, and this is your file number, and this is your file name which you have created last time. Okay, staff.dat. If you see up there the name of file. And while not end of file one means you need to load all the record until and unless I reach to the last record of this file number. So it's going to make sure that all the records have been read successfully. And this input hash one means load a data. While loading a data, input hash is used. So it's going to load the record in, that means load the data in these variables, and since the data is already loaded, it's going to print it. But after that, as I told you, how do you know that how many records are there? So when is going to make sure if I have reached to the end of the record, then it will send you out of this when loop. If it is not, again it will go back and it will load the next record. So if I run this program, you'll find this output. See, last time we created this sequential data file named staff.dat, and we have stored 3 records. So that's why it's displaying 3 records. How about that last time we also created, let's say, another one file that the file name was something over here, employee.dat. So let's run it, and that's going to display 2 records because in that second file we have created only 2 records. Okay, now what if you are not told the type of the data that is being used? In that case, you might be thinking, how can I be able to display the content of file when the data types are not specified to me? So in that case, remember, we have another one magical keyword. That means the statement, that is the line input hash one. What it does, it will load all the records of that first row in single one string variable, but you need to make sure that the variable type is, or the data type is, string. So what it does now, even if you don't know how many field names were used, it's going to load all the records in a single one variable, and it's going to display. Now if you'd like to see, go to run and see all the records are displayed. It's not only for this file. Remember the previous, we do have other file, and that one is staff.dat. Even if I write, it's going to display, but slightly different in format. You see, all are coming in double quote because they are the string. So it's going to load the data as it is, the format that you have supplied. Of course, while supplying a data in a first program, you have not written double quote, but it's going to bring along with the double quote. Why? That is the string data. So this is used in a rare case. Line input is used only for the on the emergency basis. Emergency in a case when you are not told the variable or the data type. Because say, it's a common sense. If you are not told what type of data you have stored in this sequential data file, then how are you going to load? Because the field name has to be given. Field name sense, name, address, roll number, marks in so and so subject, the total, average, tax, all of this heading, that is known as a field name. Field name has to be given. So if you'd like to display all the contents without knowing even the field name, in that case, there is only one way, the magical keyword. That's a line input hash. What it does, the first line record will get stored as it is in a one string variable, and that variable should be string. If it is a numeric, it's not going to help you. Okay, so this was the second program that was in a input mode to show you how the records that you have created previously can be retrieved. Okay, so in the next video we are going to see now how to retrieve a data having a particular condition. If it is in a case of result, if it is in a case of staff salary, increasing a tax, there are so many conditions even in a input mode. So I do believe this was an easygoing step to understand how the data can be displayed in a sequential file handling using the input mode, and all the prerequisite to understand this input mode, that is a line input hash, and EOF, all of these statements are also explained. So if you find it fruitful, do watch the next video and like this as well. Thank you.